Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dreams Abroad Live. Today, I'd like to, before we have our discussion, just take a few moments to recognize our friends in the Ukraine with a moment of silence. So we'll take about 10 seconds to do so. Thank you very much, and our thoughts are with everybody over there, and we just wanted to say that we're thinking of everybody over there right now, and from this moment on. Today we're starting our it's Dreams Abroad Live, and we have our guest today, Maritza Chavez with At Travel Notes and Things. Thank you, Maritza, for joining us. And today we are talking about travel that transforms. An interesting topic today. I'm excited about this. And Maritza is a traveler, a writer, and also a Latina. So, Maritza, thank you very much for joining us. And where are you in the world today?
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And yeah, I am coming to you guys from Illinois.
Oh, Illinois.
Yep.
And what is the weather like there today?
So today is quite a unique day because we are reaching almost 70 degrees. It's like upper 60s, which is what we Midwesterners call the fake spring because we get so excited, shorts are out and everything. But
Oh,
next week
wow.
it's going to be like 35, 30 degrees. So
Oh, wow.
we're relishing the day.
A trick spring, right? And then you go back to coats, right?
Yep, exactly.
And then when will spring arrive? What will it be like?
It'll probably be a lot of allergies in the air, rain, kind of that humidity sense coming in, but it's great. It's great as
Oh,
long as we have our allergy medicine on hand.
okay. All right. Well, as our guests are coming in, if anyone that's just joining us, this is Maritza Chavez, and she's with Travel Notes and Things. And we're getting on to our next slide here, and we're going to be talking about travel that transforms, which is a very interesting topic. And anyone that's traveled will understand this as we get through it. So as we're on this next topic, let's look at these photos here, Maritza. So you've done a lot of traveling. I know that you lived in Spain, and we'll get on to that. But where in these photos, I see there's a collection here, a little collage here. This first one here, where was this?
Yeah, so this first one, it was in Santorini, Greece,
Mhm.
and this was the reason why I selected these photos is because this in and of itself kind of visualizes the transformations that I personally have gone through. And throughout the presentation, I'll kind of refer a little bit back to these photos.
Mhm.
But the first one was my first experience traveling to Europe. This was in Greece, like I said, and I was just over the moon, excited and grateful to be there. I'd always visualized this exact scene of like seeing like the blue roofs and the white houses.
Oh,
And yeah, I was so happy, and I would say this is when things started to change for me in terms of what travel could clarify for me in terms of different things and questions that I had at that time. So
I know that Justin, who was a previous guest of ours, he really enjoyed Greece as well. I've never had the opportunity to go there, but I know that that was one of his memorable trips as well. So that's great. It looks beautiful. What about this? What about this next photo here? It looks like you were having a wonderful time with food. Food.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this next photo was in Spain. I was already living in Spain at the time. This was around the last couple weeks of the school year.
Hmm.
Very bittersweet because, of course, I was excited that we had made it through the school year, and I had these coworkers and friends. This was like after school, one of those days,
Yeah.
and it was also kind of sad because I know that also meant that I was going to be leaving soon. But nonetheless, I was super grateful for the experience, and it was just as sweet as it could be in the moment.
Nice. I had one of those moments too, where some of my the teachers in my department, they made a pumpkin pie. it was for Thanksgiving, so because they don't celebrate Thanksgiving there, right? So
Yeah,
it was very heartfelt. I came in, I was like, oh wow, it's like made from a squash though. So they made a squash pie, but it was in the family.
I
Tasted
love
pretty
that.
good though. Yeah, they tried, and it was very thoughtful. It meant a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about the next photo?
Yeah, this next photo, this was me in Positano, Italy. This was quite a milestone trip. This was after Spain, shortly after Spain. Sorry, there's like noise outside. This is shortly after teaching in Spain, and I was just so excited to be in Italy in this part specifically. I'd seen so many pictures, and I was so proud of myself too because I remember that this was like the first like fully funded trip that I funded this myself, so I was so
Oh wow.
excited, so grateful for the experience. It just, it was so I couldn't believe I was there. It was just a really exciting moment. And I was there with my sister too. We actually celebrated her birthday there, so that was really
Oh,
fun.
nice. That's so nice. Okay, finally, what's last but not least? Not least.
Yeah, so that photo was me in Dublin. So I was out there visiting a friend of mine that I'd known
Mhm.
since college. She stayed in Europe. We actually taught English in Spain together. She stayed there, and I came back home. And she was living in Ireland at the time. Well, she
Mhm.
still is. And
Oh,
this was
nice.
my last trip, like before the pandemic started. So very special one for many reasons.
Yeah. I think we all have one of those last trips, right? And
Yeah.
it's even more magical because you think back to that, you think back to that one for, many months before. So, all right, well, let's get to it. Thank you for that. That was,
Yeah.
a very good introduction to today's agenda. So, today's agenda, what is transformative travel? Which it means something different to everyone, I think. Everyone has
Mhm.
their own journey, but it'll be great to have you break this down for us. And the second topic we'll cover, which has many layers. This is just one of the layers that we'll talk about. When we discover wanderlust and when we embrace our inner child, which is personally one of my favorite aspects to it. And then how to create a transformative travel experience will be our one of our last topics that we cover today. So let's let's get on with that. Let's go. I'm excited.
Let's
So
go.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
go. Let's get on this journey. So what is transformative travel, Maritza? Let's go.
So, transformative travel, I know when you first read this, it might seem kind of like a little bit vague because, as Leesa said, it really, everybody has their own transformations when they travel, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about what they are down the presentation. But transformative travel, in its basic sense, for many of us, is describes the transformations that we have within us when we travel, right? We all know that whether it's a new country that we're visiting that we are surprised by just the things that we see and experience. It could be even a dish that you tried that changed your life in some way.
Mhm.
It could be a sight. It could be a person that you met and you had a conversation that you learned something that you just couldn't have if you stayed home, right? And you hadn't met that person on that trip. So it could be a variety of things. And as we go down these examples, I would encourage our audience to just think back to their own travel experiences and think back to maybe that conversation or that restaurant or that city that they went to that may have changed something for them, that may have impacted them for or to this day in some
Yeah.
way. Yeah. And so essentially travel opens the door, right, to something new on the basis of something that we experience perhaps for the first time. So that's something that I really love about this topic. It really is unique to every person, and it's a really awesome topic that I'm very excited to be talking to you guys about today.
Okay. So I have a question here. I'm
Mhm.
always the question asker because I'm always just kind of curious here. So let me ask you, what was your first transformative travel experience?
Yeah. So my first transformative travel experience, I always go back to studying abroad in Greece. So that first photo that I shared with you guys, Before going to Greece, just a little backstory, I had gone to culinary school. I decided it wasn't really for me, but I graduated and then I went on to get my bachelor's degree in sociology and anthropology. And even though I loved what I was studying, I was very excited about it, there was still sort of a missing piece in terms of where I saw myself after graduation. What did I want as far as my career? Where did I see it taking me? So there was a lot of vagueness and ambiguity around that area in my life at the time. And so
Mhm.
when I was studying abroad in Greece, we were kind of traveling all over Greece. And there was a day when we were in Athens and we had our afternoon off. And I remember specifically going down to the market by myself to grab a couple snacks and thinking, oh, like I know exactly where to go. I have a supermarket in mind. I felt like a local. I can take this shortcut even.
Mhm.
It was great, and then on my way back, I took the long way back, and it was one of those moments where, like, you're looking at the architecture around you, you're looking at especially a city like Athens where it's like meets you see the old and the new come together so beautifully. You see
Yeah.
the ambiance, you feel it, and I remember a question popping up in my head that kind of started to change things for me in terms of that area of ambiguity in my life, my career. And
Mhm.
the question was, why is it that in high school or in school in general, we're always asked, what do we want to be when we grow up? And we're never really questioned or asked, what kind of lifestyle do you want when you're older? What do you want your ideal day to be like? What do you want your work life balance to look like? And for me, in that moment, that just changed a lot of things for me and my perspective in terms of what my career could look like. And
Yeah.
I think that came on the basis of me being surrounded by so much beauty around me that I knew subconsciously I really wanted to make travel part of my life some way, shape, or
Mhm.
form. Whether it was my job that involved traveling, whether it was just having enough time to travel whenever I wanted, just some way, shape, or form. And I'd never experienced that until I was walking the streets of Athens and kind of being in my own thoughts about it. So that was one of the moments I go back to in terms of the transformation that travel gave me.
That's a lot to unpack right there. So that's, that, and I think that it evolves over time. So it's like even
Yeah.
thinking about, that you were there and you just thought about that all at that moment. I think it can even somebody later on in their life, right? So I'm going to go back to someone, and I'm going to bring up Ed as an example. And he has career as a police officer. Hi Ed, by the way. And later on in life, he's now writing about travel and some of his journeys that he had, and he's retired, but he's now an author writing about all these different he had the casual traveler was his book too, or it was one of his books. But I think that it doesn't it can happen early on in life, but I think travel impacts you in so many ways. And I'm using Ed as an example, but I think what you're saying is really important. And it yeah I it it's just it's yeah. So we had this conversation when we first met, Maritza,
Mhm.
you inspired me in so many ways, and
Thank
I
you.
we just talked, and that we're going to move on to the inner child part. But this is one of my favorite parts about this transformative travel experience, because I know this is why so many people love moving abroad and getting into this, but or moving abroad and getting into traveling and experiencing this part of it. But I know that people at all stages of their life, they can embrace their travel. So that's thank you for that. That was great.
Of course. Yeah. So when we discover our wanderlust and embrace our inner child, so I remember having this conversation with you, Lisa, as well. And specifically, one of the things that I really like about this whole concept is the fact that when we go from our what I call walls of our comfort zone, which is our country, essentially,
Mhm.
our environment. And we are literally, like, I see it like we pluck ourselves from here and we're like dropped into some part of the world, right? Where the language is different, the script is even different. So like we can't even read
Yeah.
on street signs. The food is different. The people are, they have different lifestyles, the weather. There's so many things that are different,
Yeah.
perhaps from where we come from. And when we are in such environments that are very different and new to us, that is when we are, in a way, we're kind of forced to tap into that sense of childlike wonder, right? So when a child is, when they're toddlers, they're very, very excited about the world. If you think about it, they're so enamored by, how bright the sun is outside. They are, looking at people, really looking at people and, smiling excitedly, just very excited about the world and about life in that moment, right? They're very present. And very much like that, we all have an inner child within. And I really think it really comes out to play when we're traveling, because that's when we are relying more on our senses, right? Taste, touch, all of that. And we're kind of lessening the logical brain a bit,
Mhm.
because when we're in a different environment, of course, we can't really read directions as we would back home and know exactly what to do, right? So we are relying on other people's body language. We're relying on, if we're at a coffee shop, like, how is that person ordering their coffee? Or like, do I pay before I sit? Or, we're paying more attention to social cues that way. And so we're relying more on those senses more than our logical brains.
Yeah.
So it's really it's tapping into that inner childlike wonder, I like to call. And in a way, the more we do this, the more we put ourselves in situations perhaps that we wouldn't at home, right? We
Mhm.
are more social, we're more smiley to people, we want to come across as peaceful, respectful travelers. We want to give off a certain vibe to people, and we, in a way, we're more social again. We may be put in situations that we wouldn't have back home. So that sort of, in a way, that's when you start to learn more about yourself, right? For example, for me, before going to Greece, I would see myself as this very shy person, very reserved, kind of to myself. I was that person in class that like wouldn't raise their hand if I had a question. I would wait and hope that someone would ask my question. And when I went to Greece, there were multiple opportunities and situations where I had to be the one to speak up, to ask a question, because if I didn't, I couldn't get from A to B, there was more at stake there. So that's when you realize, like, oh, wow, like maybe I'm not as shy as I thought, or maybe I'm not as this or that. So, in a way, we kind of peel back the layers on this sort of conditioning that we've had from our environment of like, oh, that she's this or he's that.
Social norms.
Yeah, social norms.
You're not you maybe you were shy in high school or whatever it was because there's social norms that you were afraid of speaking out about. So you when you
Exactly.
go abroad, you're reinventing yourself or you're doing something that, nobody knows, what's you're somebody else. You're not somebody else, but you're able to be free of those norms that society in the US are putting on you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, as we know, children, when they're young, I mean, you put kids together and they'll play with whoever, they'll play with
Right.
whoever. And the older we get, we grow up with certain, as you said, social norms being put on us, expectations
Yeah.
that end up influencing us. And then when we travel, it all just kind of cuts loose a bit.
Exactly. It's a great way to yeah, to put it. I so what was your first experience though when you were abroad? Was this also in Greece when you experienced your first inner child um, you know, experience? Did it have to do with language? Because I love learning or I love hearing people's language experiences because that's something that I studied. So
Yeah.
I like learning about this. So you in your previous article you talked about the difference between Spain Spanish and Mexican Spanish. So I would love to learn or hear a little bit more about this. So was that something that you experienced?
Yeah. Actually, I would say, yeah, in Spain was, I feel like Spain, because I was there longer than I was in Greece, there
Mhm.
were many opportunities for me to just learn a lot about myself in the process of learning about the country and the language,
Yeah.
which was definitely a learning curve as I shared in the article.
Mhm.
But I feel, and speaking about the language, I mean, when you're learning a new language, whether you're like a newbie to the language, or in my case, you know the language, but you don't know the way a certain country speaks it, you put yourself in a situation of, I'm gonna say this and it's probably not gonna come out the way I want it to, right? But that's the way you learn, right? So
Yeah.
you have to put yourself in that position of, I'm just gonna say what I want to say, and if it comes out funny, it'll be an icebreaker.
Mhm.
So for me, the more I did that, because I lived with the host family, so I had a lot of opportunities to just say what I said in my Mexican Spanish. And there were moments where we all laughed because I said something that didn't make sense to them, or I laughed because they said something that didn't make sense to me. So I would say that, going back to your question of if I've ever experienced that uh, sort of inner child curiosity, it
Yeah.
was then with my
Yeah.
knowledge of Spanish and being in Spain, and just, asking questions to my coworkers, to waiters at
Yeah.
restaurants, to new people I met, and just being okay with that. If you
Mhm.
make the mistake, you make the mistake, but you laugh about it and you learn.
So, yeah, when you think about it, when you're a child, you're learning a language and you're learning to speak for the first time and you're learning to
Hmm.
speak in and we call it like your language L1, your language one. Sometimes kids are learning in 2 and 3 different languages, but when you're going abroad, you're doing it again, right? So you're an adult and then you're doing it again. You feel like for me anyway, this was my experience. I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun, right? But sometimes you would feel for me, I would get embarrassed, right? So I'm like, okay, because that's the hardest part is for me anyway, it's the speaking part. So yeah, I think for me, I was in Spain too. That was, they were very welcoming. So that was fun, but it was also very difficult too at the same time. But you know, that,
Hmm.
that was the inner child part, right?
It was the
Yeah,
inner child being like, "You're gonna understand me either way."
yeah. So and figuring it out and going, wandering. I like to wander on the streets, going on the streets, wandering on the streets. That's travel, right? I mean, going and figuring out what is that word, or going to a different country in Europe and the word is there, and you're like, that sign. What does that sign say, right? It's just it's interesting. They have the graphic there, and then the word is underneath the sign. You're like, okay, I think it means that, but I'm not really sure, and that's just all part of that.
Yeah,
Little trial.
and just going with it and being comfortable with the fact that you might get lost, but knowing you'll find your way again.
But that was like one of the 2 or Falling on a Budget Part 1, telling Morgan about that, and Morgan was, talking about budgeting and downloading the map, right? And I'm like, "Thank you for that, Morgan, 'cause, I got lost a few times, but that's part of the inner child." And she's like, "I told you to download the map," but she didn't remember telling me that, but it was something she told me to do, so, yeah, all part of the fun. So, well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure there's many of our guests that have experienced that as well, and I'm sure we'll get to that in the question section. So,
Yes.
if anyone has questions, please feel free to ask them at any point. I have some written down from some of our members that have asked them, earlier on. So we'll get to that at the end. All right, so let's get to our next section here.
Yes. So this is the part where we kind of do a little bit of the work, I like to call, but I'll explain what that means a little bit. So what happens when we return from travel with different perspectives, right? Like we talked about it in the first slide,
Hmm.
travel changes our identity in some way, shape, or form, right? You
Hmm.
think you're this, you're that, and then you travel and you put yourself in situations and you're like, oh, I guess I'm also this and I'm also that. And I learned this about myself, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes we think that when we come back home
Hmm.
after traveling, we have to sort of come back and get back into the swing of things, right? Get back into our routines, get back into work and our commitments, which, I mean, I understand we don't really have control over that. We have to, get back into things. But I also think that it's very important to hold space for ourselves, to hold space for yourself when you come back home after traveling, to sort of catch up with yourself, catch
Mhm.
up with where you are physically, because sometimes our minds are still in that destination. And
Mhm.
that's why we feel kind of, like, oh, like sometimes it's just hard for me to get back into like my routine. Like I still can't get back into things all the way because our minds are still back in that destination and we're still kind of thinking about those things. So if we hold space for ourselves and we can journal it out, we can understand where we're at,
Mhm.
we're really doing ourselves a favor. And I think that this, in terms of reverse culture shock, because I did want to talk a little bit about that here, is that I know back when I came back from Greece, we really didn't have much of a reentry process. We kind
Mhm.
of just came back, everybody was on summer break. So I felt like there wasn't really much of a community. There really wasn't much of, who can we talk to about our reentry process and the fact that maybe things are different for us. We see things a little bit differently.
Mhm.
And I didn't know about transformative travel at the time, but I do remember just writing down certain feelings that I had while I was in Greece that I want to have more of now that I'm in the States. Things such as freedom, adventure, taking more time to slow down and really be present with where I'm at. Things that I experienced while I was in Greece, specifically in this example, that I didn't really necessarily have in the States, because as we know in the States, everything is very go, go, go and very fast paced. And so that's what I want to talk about here, that returning doesn't necessarily have to mean coming back into the swing of things. It really is about learning how to identify and integrate these new perspectives that you gained as you were traveling, and sort of let that be a guide to your growth as you continue on after the travels, right? There's
Mhm.
something that I like to say to my readers on my blog, which is the adventure doesn't necessarily have to end when you come back, because it really
Mhm.
is starting if you really allow yourself to learn from those experiences and see how you can integrate that into your life now, especially if you felt very connected to those sort of clarities, epiphanies, things that you learned.
So, all great points. You touched on a lot of great example. Like, just there's a lot there. You unpacked it a lot again. So
Sorry, so much to
no,
say.
no, there's a lot there. But with returning home, or just even if you're traveling, just returning back anywhere, um you know reverse culture shock is something that I'm just going to give just I'll just highlight this very briefly. I don't think people realize the impact of it. Like, I don't think people really realize that it's there, that you can feel it, and that
Mhm,
it's something, right? Um, but the but that you're right, the adventure doesn't have to end or stop. And that's part of the journey, right? It's gonna impact you, but it's how you bounce back from it, right? How you can um, deal with it, and then move on, and keep living the travel journey, right? Keep progressing, keep moving through it. um great great analysis there. And can you share an example of a shift in perspective that you had after you got back? Like, what changed you? What were you, while you were going through everything, when you got home, what was something that really impacted you through your journey, like through the metamorphosis, right? Like, through everything, like when you got
mhm.
home after Spain, when you were there, what did you feel? Like, what was something that um, you were doing some reflecting, and that's something that a lot of people do while you were feeling the reverse culture shock or not. What is something that you unpacked, right?
Mhm. I think for me, it came down to these feelings that I was feeling. Like I said, some of the things that I would feel in Greece and in Spain was this sense of adventure that I had every day, was this sense of slowing down, being more present, and just feeling free, feeling that there's so much possibility that I, quite frankly, didn't really feel in the US
Yeah.
up to that point that I started to travel. So when I was going through my process of trying to see what this all meant, I realized that for me, again, I really had to make travel a part of my life some way, shape, or form because for me, as for many of you, I'm sure that you can relate, travel just gives you life, right? Travel gives you that spark and joy in life. And for me, I thought, okay, well, I want to make it so that I feel that more often. And it's not just something that I do, every couple of years or so. So for me, it was about um, doing something that I had in the back of my mind for a long time, and that was my blog. I was so afraid to start a blog before Greece. I always thought, again, no, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm not ready, I have nothing to say. But after coming back from Spain specifically, that was like, I just spent a whole year in Spain. I moved to a different country. I dealt with the bureaucracy there. I dealt with a lot of changes. Like, I can start a blog. Like, this is no big deal in comparison to all that growth and all the, the challenges that may have come. So for me, that was my sort of outlet and my what came about all of these changes that I had. And that was something honestly that came about when I came back from Greece, but I ignored it for a while and then I went to Spain and it just became more eminent and I was like, I
Mhm.
mean, I have to do it. This is what I want to do.
Okay. Well, that's I didn't realize that. Thanks for sharing that. And now you're doing a lot. So that's great. And you're helping out with Dreams Abroad and sharing some of that with us and with our community. So we're grateful for
Likewise.
that. All right. So let's get on to our next okay. So how to create and you just touched on it a little bit, but before we do this, I want to talk about the photos here. So I'm a visual person. I like the I want to talk about each photo here and what you were doing there, where you were, what's going on, and let's recap.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So the first photo on the left, that was me in Greece.
Mhm,
It must have been like the first week that we were there. Again, just super excited, super grateful. I couldn't even believe I was there. And this was again kind of like the beginning of this transformation that I was about to go through because again, this was like the first week or so. So I was just
mhm.
starting to like acquaint myself with like my surroundings. I was very
Right.
excited. And then the next photo is the most recent international trip that I took last year in Mexico City.
Uh-huh.
And this was in El Castillo de Chapultepec in Mexico City. And I I kind of wanted to use these photos as sort of like bookends a little bit to this whole concept of transformative travel. So this is kind of like Greece was sort of the beginning of it. This photo in Mexico is kind of where we are at this point, which is just really just allowing my travels to keep inspiring me in life. And for that, it's manifested into my blog. It's manifested into finding other opportunities to express my love for travel and wanting to help other Latinas specifically to travel and doing that with Dreams Abroad and just creating more opportunities for myself and other Latinas who also want to travel to their dream destinations. So yeah, that's a little bit about those photos.
Okay, so I have so when you say other Latinas, so what exactly what's been happening? Can you just give us a little can you give us just share a little bit more about that? So um what what's been happening on that front a little bit? So what do you mean by that? So when you're do you find that there's Latinas that don't really go out and travel or don't really have the experience of traveling or aren't really aware of how to do it or
Mhm.
the community just isn't going out and traveling to certain parts of the world or what is your experience with that?
Yeah. So the reason why I started out with this desire to inspire and help more Latinas to travel is because at the time when I started traveling myself, I didn't really see a lot of Latino representation on the travel and blogging niche. So for that, when I wanted to prepare for my study abroad experience, for example, I looked up a lot of information, but I know that it would have been really, really amazing to see another Latina, another person who looked like
Mhm.
me, to be out there doing that and really just living their life, to give me, in a sense, that validation of you can also do this. Like, it's not an impossible thing for you. And it's very true that nowadays I've seen so many Latinas like do incredible things, from solo traveling to
Mhm.
riding their motorcycle all across like South America by
Yeah,
themselves and doing incredible things. And I'm so grateful to be in a time when I get to see this.
yeah,
And I that's my intention with my blog, that I want to add my 2 cents into the mix, and also talk about other topics in Latina travel, which is,
mhm,
what it's like to be first generation and travel. I know that in the beginning of my travel experience, there's almost like this sense of guilt. And I have a post where I talk about this, why, there aren't a lot of Latinos studying abroad to begin with. And
mm,
I think that there are a lot of sort of inhibitions that we have as first generation, as maybe you're the first in your family, you're the oldest in your family, and you have a lot of responsibility put on yourself, and sometimes we don't really have that mental capacity to even think about what the things that we want, like, oh, I would really like to travel, because we may be, taking care of our families, we might be helping out with that, we might be thinking more of, what's the direct path to success that's been tried and true, and how can I get to that.
yeah.
Of course, this isn't, everyone's experience, but this is a lot of people's experiences. And I do want to talk about that to them, and sort of represent them in the travel blogging niche.
That's a great explanation. Thank you for that. Good for you. I
Thank you.
yeah, I know it's a family of, the Latino culture is a very, family oriented, family centered, culture. And I think you're great. You're doing a great thing. So thanks for that explanation, because I know a lot of our viewers, may not be aware, and you just define that very well. So
Thank you.
all right, so let's go to our how to create a transformative travel experience.
Yeah.
Well, let's do a recap first. But if for anyone that was not on before, we can kind of
Yeah.
do a little bit of a recap and get into that, and then we'll get into the experience.
Yeah. So, a recap for anyone who is catching up with us. So, thus far, we've talked about what is transformative travel. So, it's an experience within the travel journey that has changed something for someone on a deep and personal level. And then we went on to the different layers of transformative travel, which I understand can sometimes be a little vague, but we'll have something for you at the end that can hopefully sort of guide you through the process a little bit more. And so, one of the things is when we discover wanderlust and embrace our inner child. So, this is when that moment in travel when we are completely in a different environment, and we're first forced to kind of go back into that toddler state of curiosity and wonder for the world and what that means, and why it's important to pay attention to that. And then the third thing is how to create a transformative travel experience, which we'll go back to a little bit, and I can break that down for you guys a little bit more. But basically, it's reflecting, journaling, if you would like to, and if you feel called to, on those moments when you learned something new or became impressed by something on your travels.
Great. So where let's go to let's get into the travel. The First of all, I think Cassie has a question. She asked a question, but the let me get to that part. Hold on. The activities. So, what activities help you transition back to living in the U.S.?
Yes, that is a really good question. Some of the activities that helped me was to do something physical, because I
Yeah.
realized that the more I sat, if I spent too much time sitting down, or even just kind of being in my head, whether it was journaling, and which I encourage people to do, but if we sit down for too long with it, it can kind of we can drive ourselves crazy a little bit. So for me and for others, I would recommend partaking in a physical activity that you like, whether that's exercising, working out, whether that is, for me, I really got into DIY projects, redoing my space based off of Airbnbs that I saw and I stayed in abroad. I kind of redid my space, and just have it reflect more of how I felt and where I felt like I was in life. So yeah, DIY projects, working out, cooking. Cooking was also a very important thing for me. I love to cook, learning new recipes and that, and being surrounded by friends and family and feeling that support during this sort of time of transition.
Okay. Okay, that's a great explanation for that. And I think we'll use this recap for the create how to create the transformative travel. I always get it's a tongue twister
Yeah,
here.
it is.
How to create a transformative travel experience. Let's go off of this and uh explain to our viewers really how to create that, right? Like how to create that transformative travel experience. Because I know that's something that your site does really well. And I want you to explain to them how to get to your site and how to, how to work through that. So if we could do that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your really kind words, first of all. And yeah, so when I talk to my readers about how to actually create a transformative travel experience, I like to break it up into three parts. So the first part is sort of that prepping stage when you are perhaps packing your bags, you're choosing what you're going to take, you're kind of tying the loose ends around your home, preparing your home for travel. And that is the time that you can sort of set intentions for yourself. You can write them down or you can vocalize them however you want to do that. And you set intentions, for example, on, what is a goal that I want to achieve. It could be a personal goal, like on personal growth. It can be, I have a goal of seeing this site or this monument. It can be a challenge, like I'm going to challenge myself to take myself out on a date on one of those nights or put myself out there, do something that I wouldn't at home. It could be something as small as, I'm going to try this new cuisine. Well, small or big, depending on how you see that. It really can be a lot of different things that you can sort of set the intention so that you can do them while you're traveling and kind of let that marinate in your mind as you're prepping. The second part would be while you're traveling. So this is when you actually take action and you either whatever it is that you set the intention for example, if one of your intentions was to be more present, you set the intention to be more present. One of the things you can do is sort of buy some sort of snack or food that you can take to a local park, sit down and sort of observe your surroundings and really take them in, spend an hour or however much you would like, and really observe what's going on. Personally, that's one of the things I really like to do. Maybe it's a sociology nerd in me, but I really like
Mhm.
to see like the social order of things where I'm at, like how do people interact? How do parents interact with their kids? How do people use green spaces around them? Are they having a
Hmm.
snack, a picnic, or are they just sort of walking by? Just paying attention to all of these different social cues, and that's a really good way to gain insight of the place that you're at, if that's one of
Mhm.
your goals to be present. And so it can be that could be go to a grocery store and see what kind of foods they have, do some sort of immersive activity, a cooking class, a dance class, whatever
Those
calls
are
out to
fun.
you. So that's what you do in like the middle portion. And then
Mhm.
the last portion, the third part is when you're back home. So again, this is about holding space for yourself to reflect, to journal, to vocalize, even talk to yourself. I know I've done that. If you're driving somewhere, I talk to myself, so, like, it's a way to just get it out there. But whatever you feel like doing, and again, just sort of holding that space for yourself, to just get it all out there. It doesn't have to be pretty, it could be as raw as you want it to be. If you are feeling challenged by your home country, like, "I really don't like how in the States we do this," or, "I really appreciate that in this country they do this," or vice versa, whatever it is, be as real, be as honest, and those will be sort of the guiding points that you can work on after
Mhm.
the trip is over to sort of understand where you're at and find ways to integrate that into your life and make those necessary changes for yourself. Because at the end of the day, transformative travel is just another avenue to improve your life and to be
Mhm.
happier. It's just that here we're doing it through travel and we're adding sort of more of a guided process with it because as we know travel changes people in different ways, but this is sort of a breakdown of how it can. And with this, if you're here with us and you might be thinking, okay, so how can I do this myself, like it seems sort of a little vague still for me. I actually have a template for you guys if you would like to download that. It is called the Transformative Travel Journal Template,
Mhm.
and it is free for you guys. It's on my blog. It's free for anyone who goes into my blog and reads the article. But we'll have it here for you guys as well if
Yeah.
you feel called to download it and kind of get a little bit more of a guided step-by-step process, and that is completely free to you guys if you guys would like that.
So, okay, I have a question. I
Mhm.
always have questions, but what how did you okay, so how did you come up with the template? Like what were you I know that you just walked us through this process, but like you just gave, the information. We'll have that at the end for everybody if you want to copy that down and whatnot. But what how did you come up with this process of, the template and, and doing this, you know, all of this, right? Like, I know that you walked us through this in this short amount of time, right? Like
Mhm.
this is years because you went even a year before me to Spain, right? And I know that when I was looking, it's part of Dreams Abroad's story, right? When I was looking to go teach abroad, like there were not the resources that there are now, which is part of why we have the resources that we do, community that we do. But
Yeah.
you know, it, it's just how did you come up with this journal?
Yeah. So really, like you said, it's kind of been like years in the making, kind of like completely based off of my experience and what I've also read from other people that have experienced this sort of challenge when they
Mhm.
come back after travel, when they are sort of getting into that, first week of readjustment and such. And, you know, maybe they have their sleep schedule down, maybe they have their rituals down and all the things, but there's still an emotional component that doesn't allow them to fully sort of be okay with where they're at. And so for me, because journaling has been very therapeutic for me in different areas of my life, I thought maybe I can create a journal, something a little more guided to help people understand this and to help people write down and put on paper what it is that they're feeling. Because like I said, like
Yeah.
when I kind of walked into transformative travel, I was I felt very uh identified with the content that I was reading about it, way more than, a reverse culture shock, step by step, do this. And because it talked a lot more about the emotional aspect of it. And I
Right.
thought I could write about this because I have a lot of personal insight on this and I can create a journal that could help people also go through this and not be kind of confused on, well, where do I start? You know?
So when you go through the journal, like do you read through some of your older journals and then the newer ones? Like have you looked through because I know we've talked about identity and things like that, and this could be a whole other topic for another time, but like have you looked through some of the older ones and some of the newer ones and kind of just like looked at the because this is a process, right? Transformation,
Mhm.
a metamorphosis of that word is just a very long word, a long word. But like have you thought about all of that and
Yeah.
yeah.
So, looking back on some of my journals, for example, the most recent trip that I did to Mexico City, that was fall of last year. And some of the intentions that I wrote, I have it pulled up here
Mhm.
that I can share. Was the first question, which is in the pre stage when you're
Mhm.
packing up and things like that. The first question is, what is your intention for this trip? What do you hope to experience? Whether it's situations, people, sites, connections.
Mhm.
And for this, I said, I want to set the intention to reconnect with myself, feel the feeling of possibility, again, feel just overall more healthy, more active, and more in control of just everything. This was like in the midst of like, the pandemic and things like that. Like
Mhm.
it just started, the day started to just get shorter, and that seems to impact me a little bit.
Yeah.
So I wrote this as just the intentions that I had for myself going into this trip. I just want to feel more alive and just feel more like happier and full of possibility like I do when I travel.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you. That helps, and I know that for those that are looking to have this type of tool, that will help them as well. And I think everyone should check it out just for their own curiosity, and it I think it will help you. And I'm actually going to be traveling here soon, and I'm going to download it as well and take it with me on my trip. So I will be
Awesome.
sharing. All
Thank
right,
you.
our next slide here, Cassidy. Thank you. Hi, Cassidy, by the way, and thanks. I usually do it in the beginning, but we had our moment of silence today. So thank you, Cassidy, very much. And our questions and answers. So I do have, if there's anyone that has any questions, which I see a few here, before I get to those, I do have one from Kira Brown, who's one of our members, and she had a question that she sent in earlier, and she was sorry she couldn't make it. But what changes have you made in your day to day life based on the things you have learned while traveling?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it's all a learning process, right? Because it's one thing to journal out the things, and then it's another thing to learn how to integrate them and give
Yeah.
yourself that time to, do that. But for me, it's been just sort of not being so hard on myself in terms of, you have to be on a strict schedule. You have to have like a 5-year plan. Things have to go exactly as they are. Because as we know with travel, things almost pretty much never turn out the way you want them to, right? There's always
Mhm.
something that happens that's out of your control. And for me, it's been, allowing myself to take more breaks throughout the day, allowing myself to go out in nature and just do more of those things that before I even went to Greece and studied abroad, I didn't even think about doing. Because I think it goes back to this, this purpose that I have with the blog of helping first generation Latinas, is that a
Mhm.
lot of the times we don't give ourselves that luxury to, like, just take a break, sit down, take a nap if you want,
Yeah.
because you're like, no, because like, so and so's depending on me, or no, because I don't want to let so and so down, no, because of this, no, because of that. And I had that very much like ingrained. And I mean, I had a really good childhood. Like, I'm not trying to say that it was, dark and heavy, and I'm grateful for that. But there is this sort of layer of like, that I was experiencing of so much responsibility that oftentimes I put on myself.
Mhm.
And after coming back from travel, I sort of made that intention to be easier on myself. And, if I did certain tasks, great. If I didn't, that's also great too.
Okay.
Mhm.
So how has your family reacted to your journey as a whole? That'll be our wrap up question here, because I know that might be a a long answer. I'm not sure. A
How has your family reacted to your journey as a whole? My family has been very supportive of it. I'll be honest. At the beginning, when I came back from Greece and I came back with these, what my family would maybe consider radical ideas,
Mhm.
they were pretty shocked by it. They were kind of like skeptical a bit of it, because for
Yeah.
them, it's like, well, the US offers everything you would want and more. Why would you want to move away? Which is what I would say. And so there was a lot of that, a lot of questioning from them because they
Mhm.
didn't understand it. But the more we've been on this sort of journey now, things are a lot different. They are very much supportive of these ideas, and they even kind of implemented that in themselves. They are now actually, as we speak right now, they're in Mexico right now, just
Oh, really?
yeah. And they went on their own, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna go for a week. We'll see you guys later. Whereas before they wouldn't do that, but
Yeah.
they recognize like the therapeutic effects of travel, that they're like, okay, bye. So yeah, I definitely think that this journey as a whole has helped all of us in a way to just, put time for ourselves and do it through
Yeah.
travel.
Good for them, by the way. And
Yeah.
That's exciting. All right. Well, Cassidy, can we get to our next? Okay. So this is where and I'll let you explain this, Maritza, because this is your area of expertise.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the link for the Transformative Travel Journal. I even have a hard time saying it sometimes. You can take a picture of it, take a picture of it, or you can yeah, maybe we can even include it in the comments of the replay video to
Yeah.
make it easier and people can just click on it. But yeah, this will take you to the journal template, and again, it's free and you guys can take advantage of that if you feel called to. And if you do, I really hope that it helps you as much as it has helped me.
And if anybody does use this, and we hope that you do, please, write us, let us know how it's
Yeah.
worked for you. Even if it's 6 months from now, let us know how it's, helped you on your travels and what it's done and whatnot. So
Yeah, we'd
we,
love to know.
we would love to, yeah, we would love the feedback. So thank you very much. And let's get to the next. All right. And for our newsletter here, we will be sharing upcoming updates in the newsletter that's not really anywhere else online. So please join our newsletter and become a part of our community. And we'd like to hear from you. So you can do that on our website. There's a subscribe button, and we would love to have you as a part of our community and hear your feedback. So that's really what we have for you now. So thank you. And our next live, please email me if you have any recommendations, because right now we are going to be uh, moving to our spring break session. And then I am open to suggestions, but I have a few really creative ideas. So we'll be in touch and letting you know what's going on there. So that's that for now. So thank you
Awesome.
all for joining us.
Thank
Maritza,
you.
thank you so much for your time. We enjoyed having you, and we
Thank
will
you.
see you soon through your articles and also on your blog. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.